Every major streaming platform is trying to figure out the same thing right now. How do you make a show so consuming that people can't stop watching it, even when it's actively making them feel terrible? The Boys cracked that code. And it did it years before anyone else was even asking the question. Hey, I'm Mac, and this video is about exactly how they did it, because the answer goes deeper than it's violent or it's dark. The Boys is built on a precise understanding of how your brain actually works. I've been obsessed with this show for years. At some point, I stopped just watching it and started asking why it works the way it does. Why certain scenes stay with you for days. Why you feel physically uncomfortable watching specific moments. Why even when you're frustrated with a season, you can't actually stop. So I went deep, read the psychology behind it, dug into how Kripke talks about building the show, looked at the actual science of how violent media affects the brain. The violence in this show is engineered. Every bit of it. Your attention is a product. Every platform, every algorithm, every media company, all competing for the same finite thing. Streaming has moved past getting you to subscribe. Now it's about keeping you from leaving, tonight, against TikTok and infinite scroll. In that fight, shock is a weapon. It triggers the brain's threat response and locks you in before you've decided whether you want to be there. Eric Kripke, who created the show and runs it as showrunner, understood this precisely. If you want to criticize a culture addicted to media, you have to dominate that culture's attention first. Gore, transgression, moral horror. Used in that order, at that intensity, for that reason. Vought International, the fictional company that manages the superheroes, runs on manufactured outrage, data-driven targeting, and focus groups. The show uses Vought to demonstrate exactly how shock gets weaponized to control people. And then it does the same thing to you. The gore and transgression grab your attention, and the actual argument about power and corporate greed walks in behind it. Shock is the hook. The show just makes that visible by having its villain use the same one. But to understand why any of that works, you need to understand what's happening in your brain when you watch it. William James, one of the founding figures of modern psychology, said human experience is ultimately defined by what we agree to attend to. Basically, what you pay attention to is what your life actually consists of. The brain didn't evolve to seek entertainment. It evolved to detect threats. Cave bears, lions, hyenas. The survival instinct is just this: lock onto danger and don't let go. That wiring is still running. Algorithms are built to exploit it. Blood, violence, moral horror. The brain processes those the same way it processes real danger. Researchers studied this after a major public attack. They found that people consuming 6 or more hours of news coverage daily were 9 times more likely to report symptoms of acute stress than people physically present at the event. The people watching on television were more traumatized than the people who were actually there. That's the mechanism The Boys is running on. And once you see it, the craft choices the show makes stop looking accidental. Think about every story you've ever loved. A film, a show, a book that hooked you completely. Underneath all of it is the same basic skeleton. A world gets established, something disrupts it, things escalate, there's a breaking point, then some kind of resolution. Every single story runs on this. Audiences have absorbed this framework so deeply over their entire lives that they don't consciously track it anymore. They just feel it. Kripke uses that skeleton as the foundation, then buries it completely under everything else. Dialogue, character work, violence, absolute chaos. By the time you're watching The Boys, you're just inside the experience. That invisibility is the whole point. Before The Boys, Kripke spent years in network television, 22 episodes a year. That format teaches you something streaming shows often forget. You cannot ask an audience to wait 3 episodes for things to click. You have to earn them every single week or you lose them. That discipline is locked into The Boys from day one. Every episode delivers. The show never coasts. The pilot shows exactly how shock gets embedded properly. There's a screenwriting principle called save the cat. The idea is that your protagonist needs to do something likable early on so the audience trusts and roots for them. It's been a staple of Hollywood storytelling for decades. The Boys inverts this completely on purpose. Writers call it a kill the cat, and the show earns it before it happens. Before A-Train ever appears, Huey is shown at work stalking an A-Train branded computer mouse. An A-Train advertisement passes on a taxi while he and Robin talk about their future. The show plants him twice. So when A-Train runs through Robin at superhuman speed and Huey is left holding her hands, just her hands, you were already in that world. The shock has the whole foundation underneath it. That's earning dread. That setup also establishes something the whole series runs on. Seth Rogen, one of the executive producers, framed it simply: superpowered physics have horrific consequences on fragile human bodies. Once the pilot proves that rule, You carry it into every scene that follows. You already know what this world does to people. That weight is on you going in. The camera is built to make sure you feel it. The Boys moves away from the clean, safely lit look of most television. Handheld. Close. Camera operators physically track action sequences, sliding alongside stunt performers, getting the lens inside the moment. Shooting in real, low-lit locations strips away the last layer of safety from the image. When something horrific happens, you're already uncomfortably close. There's nowhere to retreat to. The groundwork, the weight, the camera right in your face, that's what the shock lands on. But the shock itself isn't one thing. The show deploys it in 3 completely different ways, each one hitting a different part of you. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this breakdown, please hit like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a ton. The first is visual shock. The body knows first. There's a concept called the abject, coined by philosopher Julia Kristeva, and it describes anything that reminds your body it's a fragile, biological object that can be destroyed. Wounds, corpses, a body torn open. Kristeva's idea is that we subconsciously treat the human body as something safe and whole. When that gets destroyed on screen, the brain doesn't process it as fiction. It processes it as a threat to its own safety. The reaction is physical before it's emotional. Nausea, a gagging reflex, the urge to look away. The brain processes what it sees through mirror neurons, cells that fire identically whether you're performing an action or watching someone else perform it. So when Homelander lasers someone in half, when a character gets exploded from the inside, your brain runs a small version of that experience through your own system. You absorb it. Something in your body registers it. That's why certain moments in this show linger long after the episode ends. The show layers this further with splatstick, horror and comedy happening in the exact same moment. A character whose powers are absurd being deployed in genuinely violent situations. The brain doesn't have a clean category for that. It just locks on, trying to figure out what it's looking at. That uncertainty keeps you engaged in a way that either tone alone couldn't. Visual shock hits the body. Moral shock hits somewhere deeper. Moral shock has nothing to do with surprise. You can know exactly what's about to happen and still be morally shocked when it does. It's about watching something so far beyond what you're able to accept that your brain just stops. You know what happened. You can describe it, but you can't process the scale of how wrong it was. That gap between knowing and processing is where the show lives. The airplane sequence in Season 1 is the clearest example. Homelander's entire existence runs on public adoration. It's the only thing Vought needs from him, and the only thing he needs from the world. So when he and Queen Maeve intercept a hijacked flight, he calmly, coldly runs the numbers, calculates that any attempt at a rescue carries a small risk to his flawless public image, decides that risk is unacceptable, and flies away while every single person on that plane dies. You knew he was capable of something like this. The shock arrives anyway. Moral shock delays anger. Normally, when a villain does something monstrous, you feel outrage right away. You want them stopped. You want justice, and that energy keeps you locked in. When the shock is overwhelming enough, that outrage can't form straight away. There's a gap. You just sit there, unable to look away, waiting for your emotions to catch up to what you just watched. The Boys keeps widening that gap on purpose. Your attention is completely captured inside it. The third type works differently again. Visual shock hits your body. Moral shock paralyzes your judgment. Psychological shock gets into your chest and stays there. Most television runs on an unspoken promise. Good people will eventually be rewarded. Things will get better. The Boys systematically breaks that promise, season after season. Psychologists have a term for what that creates: a cathartic deadlock. That's basically when a story puts you through real emotional pressure, but never gives you the release you're waiting for. You keep watching, hoping the tension will break. It doesn't. Every time the main characters suffer a devastating loss, the show doesn't even things out. The world just continues. Corrupt, rigged, morally hollow. And you sit with that because the show won't let you put it down. There's even a term for what happens in your body watching this. Researchers call it affective contagion. When a character suffers on screen, a version of that suffering transfers to the viewer, not metaphorically. The emotion moves from them to you. You absorb it. It stays in you after the episode ends, long after you've closed the tab. The deadlock never fully releases. 3 types, all running at the same time. And for 3 seasons, it worked. Watching Season 4 was frustrating in a way that's hard to describe. I could see exactly what was going wrong, and I couldn't do anything about it. There's a clinical term for what happens when you expose someone to the same disturbing content repeatedly: desensitization. The first time you see something horrific, your body registers it hard. With repeated exposure, that response fades. The brain adapts. The thing that hit you hard 3 seasons ago barely registers now. And this is the trap the show quietly built for itself. The whole mechanism runs on spikes. Each moment of shock needs to hit at roughly the same intensity as the last to keep you engaged. Once an audience has seen enough extreme violence, those same things stop producing that spike. To get the same reaction, the content has to keep escalating. Brain scans of people exposed to repeated media violence show the parts of the brain that process emotion basically go quiet over time. The show trains you to feel less, then it has to hit harder, then you feel even less. Season 4 is where the escalation outran everything underneath it. The core cast, Butcher, Huey, Starlight, Homelander, have what screenwriters call plot armor. It's the invisible protection main characters carry, the audience's creeping suspicion that the show won't actually kill them. That knowledge quietly drains every confrontation. When Homelander corners the protagonists and they walk away without consequence, it feels like a formality. The only deaths that happen are recently introduced characters you have no real investment in, existing purely to be killed for shock value. I watched the Victoria Newman scene in the Season 4 finale and felt nothing. She's a politician secretly working both sides, one of the show's most carefully built pieces, and my body just sat there when it happened. That's what desensitization actually feels like. The show does something drastic, and you realize you stopped caring whether it did. That's the point where the show broke its own rules. Transgressive fiction, stories that deliberately push past social and moral boundaries to expose something true, has one rule it can't break. Pushing a boundary only works when it means something. The shock has to be doing something, exposing a system, deepening a character, proving a point. When it's just there to be extreme, it violates the show's own logic. The early seasons understood this. Season 4 forgot it. Huey is the emotional core of this entire series, the character whose pain the audience has been carrying since the first episode. When that pain gets used as cheap shock with no consequence, it breaks the contract the show made with you from the beginning. The satire collapsed under the same pressure. By Season 4, the allegories had become one-to-one, specific political figures, recent events, zero subtlety. And shock without anything real underneath it stopped feeling like a point being made. When shock stops being attached to an actual argument, there's nothing left underneath it. It's just noise. Which is what makes Season 5 interesting. It's the last one. A lot of the problems I just described come from a show trying to keep its options open, protecting characters for future seasons, withholding resolutions, stretching arcs past where they should have ended. Season 5 doesn't have that problem. There are no future seasons to protect, no reason to hold anything back. Butcher, Homelander, all of it. It either gets resolved or it doesn't. The plot armor falls away when there's nothing left to save it for. And that's the whole thing, really. The blood, the carnage, the moral collapse, the institutions protecting the powerful, the ideology sold as heroism, that's just the reality, rendered visible. The Boys uses shock to implicate you, to make you feel, physically and emotionally, what it actually costs to live inside a system like this. And that's why even when the formula breaks, even when the escalation loses the plot, the show still has this hold on people that nothing else quite matches. It got inside you before you noticed it was doing it. That was always the plan.